What happens when the toughest man in the courtroom is the first one to fall apart? Before you answer, drop a comment telling us whether you believe justice should always leave room for mercy, because by the end of this story, that question is going to hit very differently. At 9:14 on a gray Thursday morning in Providence, Rhode Island, a former Marine walked into Judge Caprio's courtroom like he was ready for a fight, and less than an hour later, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Hit that subscribe button if you believe the strongest stories are the ones nobody sees coming. Because the moment everyone would be talking about later, the moment millions would replay if they had been there with a camera, didn't start with tears. It started with attitude. It started with a parking ticket, a school zone violation, and a man who looked like he would rather crack in half than let anyone see he was hurting. Like this video, if you've ever met someone who looked hard on the outside and broken on the inside. Because 36-year-old Daniel Mercer came in wearing a faded black Under Armour quarter zip, dark blue Levi's, and scuffed tan Bates boots that still looked military even though his uniform days were years behind him. He carried himself like every muscle had been trained to ignore pain. Broad shoulders, square jaw. A high-end tight haircut grown out just enough to say he no longer had to follow regs, but not enough to say he had stopped being a Marine. Share this with someone who needs to see that one moment of compassion can change an entire life. Daniel wasn't some reckless kid. He was a decorated former staff sergeant with 2 deployments to Afghanistan, a Bronze Star with valor, a bad left knee, a sleepless mind, and a 2011 blue Ford F-150 with 182,000 miles on it, and 3 citations tied to one ugly morning on March 28, 2025. Case number TM 2504173, Providence Municipal Court, 4th floor, fluorescent lights humming overhead, Clerk Maria DeLuca at the desk, Bailiff Reggie Nolan near the door, a gallery half full of people waiting for meter tickets, noise violations, and one landlord dispute no one could stop whispering about. Daniel's case should have been ordinary. It was. The paper trail said he had blown through a 20-mile-per-hour school zone at 37. It said he failed to yield to a crossing guard at the corner of Broad Street and Potters Avenue at 7:42 a.m. It said he parked illegally in a marked loading zone outside St. Raphael Family Clinic for 16 minutes after the stop, then argued with Officer Lena Torres when she approached his truck. 3 citations, 1 hearing. The kind of thing that usually ends with a fine, a lecture, and everyone moving on to lunch. But that paper trail left out the sound of sneakers scraping pavement. It left out a little red backpack dropping to the crosswalk. It left out the body cam audio that would make the entire courtroom go silent. When Maria called his name, Daniel stepped forward with the kind of confidence that bordered on disrespect. Not yelling, not wild, worse, controlled, flat, the tone of a man who believed if he stayed cold enough, nobody could touch him. Daniel Mercer. He raised a hand without looking at the clerk. Here. Judge Caprio looked over his glasses, dark robe, calm face, that familiar patience that had seen every excuse in the city and still somehow made room for humanity. Good morning, Mr. Mercer. Daniel gave a short nod. Morning. Not your honor, not yet. The judge glanced at the file. You've got 3 matters joined for efficiency: speeding in a school zone, failure to yield to a crossing guard, and illegal standing in a clinic loading zone. Did you receive notice? Sure did. And what would you like to tell me? Daniel exhaled through his nose. That this is a pylon. I wasn't racing anybody. I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. And parking in that loading zone for a few minutes shouldn't make me public enemy number 1. A few people in the gallery shifted. One older woman in a red cardigan folded her arms tighter. Judge Caprio didn't move. You're contesting all 3. I'm saying context matters. That's fair, the judge said. Context always matters. Daniel seemed almost relieved, like maybe he'd found the one person in the building who might listen. Then the judge turned one page in the file, paused, and asked a question that changed the air in the room. "Mr. Mercer, have you seen the surveillance footage?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "No, sir." "Would you like to?" The way he answered told everyone he thought footage would help him. "Absolutely." And that was the first mistake. There was a monitor on the side of the courtroom, angled so the judge, clerk, defendant, and first two rows could see it. Maria hit play. Grainy security footage from a Dunkin' 2 storefronts down from the school crosswalk came up on screen. Time stamp in the corner. 07:42:16. A silver Honda Odyssey waiting to turn. A crossing guard in reflective aura. Unji Paula Jenkins stepping into the lane with her stop paddle lifted. Two children at the curb, one in a red backpack. Then Daniel's blue F-150 entered frame too fast. Not cartoon fast, real fast. Fast enough that the truck's nose dipped hard when he hit the brakes late. Fast enough that Paula lunged sideways and grabbed the red backpack kid by the shoulder. Fast enough that the little boy's shoe came off and spun under the truck's front bumper. Fast enough that the woman in the red cardigan in the gallery let out an involuntary gasp. Nobody said a word. You could hear the air conditioner, the light buzz, somebody's bracelet clinking against a bench. On screen, the truck stopped with its grill halfway into the crosswalk. Paula staggered back. One child started crying. Another parent on the far corner pointed at the truck and shouted something the silent footage couldn't carry. Maria paused it. And just like that, the man who had walked in acting like the city was wasting his time didn't look quite as large anymore. Judge Caprio turned his head slowly toward Daniel. "Do you still believe this is a pylon?" Daniel stared at the frozen image. His face didn't fall. It hardened. That was the thing about him. Every emotion seemed to put on body armor before it came out. "I stopped." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The judge leaned back. "You stopped after entering the crosswalk." "I stopped." "You understand there were children in that crosswalk." "I understand the video angle makes it look worse than it was." That did it. The whispering got louder. Bailiff Reggie took one step forward, just a quiet reminder that tension had edges in a courtroom. Judge Caprio lifted a hand and the room settled. Then he said the first line that would later be repeated all over Providence. "Mr. Mercer, the camera doesn't create danger. It reveals it." Daniel's eyes flicked up. For the first time, something besides irritation showed on his face. Not remorse. Not yet. Just a crack of surprise. He hadn't expected to be met so cleanly. Officer Lena Torres stood from the witness bench when called. She was 41, hair pulled tight, navy uniform pressed sharp, body cam clipped at her chest. She had the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command a room. 12 years on the force. No theatrics. No grudge, just facts. "I responded after Ms. Jenkins called dispatch," she said. "Vehicle described as a blue Ford pickup with partial plate Rhode Island 793 LD. I located the vehicle approximately 4 minutes later outside St. Raphael Family Clinic in a loading zone marked no standing. The driver, identified as Mr. Mercer, was inside the vehicle." Judge Caprio asked, "How did the interaction go?" She gave the smallest pause. It was tense. Daniel let out a humorless laugh. The judge looked at him. "You'll have a chance." Officer Torres continued. "I informed him he'd been reported for failing to yield in the school zone. He denied it. I asked for license, registration, and proof of insurance. He initially refused to hand me the registration. Then he complied." "Did he threaten you?" "No, Your Honor." "Did he use profanity?" Another pause. "Yes." Daniel shook his head like it was ridiculous anyone would care. The judge noticed. "Words matter, Mr. Mercer. Continue, officer." He stated, quote, "Go find a real criminal," and, quote, "I fought for this country and now I've got a city cop harassing me over painted lines." He was visibly agitated, hands shaking, pupils dilated, breathing rapid. Now Daniel looked at her directly. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't hatred either. It was fear wearing anger's face. Officer Torres kept going. When I asked why he was parked in the loading zone, he said he was taking care of family business, and that if I wrote the ticket I'd be proving the city had no respect for veterans. Judge Caprio folded his hands. Did he explain what family business? No, sir. He only said, "You got no idea what kind of morning I'm having." That sentence landed differently than the rest. Maybe it was the way she said it. Maybe it was because, underneath all the sharp edges, it sounded true. Daniel looked away. Like this video if you believe accountability and compassion can exist in the same room, because what happened next forced everyone there to confront that exact question. Up to that moment, the room had a villain. Maybe not a monster, but a villain. A man who had scared children, insulted an officer, and tried to hide behind his service record. People were ready for the lecture, ready for the fine, ready for that satisfying little hit of courtroom justice. Then Judge Caprio asked Officer Torres one more question. "Did you activate your body cam?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Is it in evidence?" "It is." Daniel's head snapped toward the bench. And now the confidence was really gone. "Your Honor," he said quickly, "I don't think we need to." Judge Caprio cut in gently. "If there's context, Mr. Mercer, this is where we find it." Maria loaded the clip. The room watched the shaky chest-level angle, morning glare off windshields. Daniel's F-150 sitting crooked near the clinic curb, hazard lights blinking. Officer Torres approaching, her voice professional. Daniel inside the truck, hand on the wheel, jaw set. The audio caught everything the surveillance camera could not. His breathing, her footsteps, distant siren, somebody coughing from the clinic entrance. "Sir, I need your registration." "For what?" "For the stop that was called in." "I didn't hit anybody." "That's not what I said." The exchange escalated fast, Daniel's voice sharp, Officer Torres calm. He threw the registration packet onto the dashboard hard enough that papers slid. She asked him to lower his voice. He laughed once, ugly and empty. Then she said, "Sir, are you okay to drive right now?" That was the moment something strange happened. Daniel froze. Not for long, barely 2 seconds, but everyone saw it. His eyes blinked hard like the question had struck someplace deeper than the tickets. "I'm fine." "Have you slept?" "What?" "Have you slept, Mr. Mercer?" "Write your ticket." The judge held up a finger, and Maria paused the video right there. "You asked him that because—" Officer Torres answered without looking away from the bench. "Because his hands were shaking so badly he dropped his license twice, and he looked like he'd either been crying or not sleeping. I couldn't tell which." Daniel shut his eyes for a moment. The gallery, which had been ready to hate him, shifted into a different kind of silence. Not softer exactly, more alert, more complicated. Judge Caprio asked, "Did you conduct any sobriety evaluation?" "I observed no odor of alcohol, no slurring, no signs of intoxication. I believed fatigue or emotional distress was more likely." "And yet you cited him." "Yes, sir, because regardless of the reason, the violations were real." That line mattered. It made everything sturdier. This wasn't a trick where harm disappeared because suffering showed up. The danger was real. The excuses were not enough. But the story was not finished. Daniel finally spoke, voice lower now. "I said I stopped." Judge Caprio looked at him. "You also said she had no idea what kind of morning you were having." Daniel's throat moved. "She didn't." The judge nodded once, then "Tell me." For 3 full seconds, Daniel said nothing. People who have never sat in a courtroom think the loud moments are the dramatic ones. Sometimes they are. But the real turning points, they happen when a room full of strangers realizes, A single man has just been offered the truth and has no idea how to survive it. Daniel gave a dry laugh that had no humor in it. What difference would it make? Judge Caprio answered with another line people would repeat later. The truth doesn't erase what you did, Mr. Mercer. It tells me what justice should do with it. That should have opened him. It didn't, not yet. Daniel lifted his chin. I was handling family business, that's all. The judge's eyes went to the file again. I have a note here from defense intake that you submitted 2 documents this morning. One from the Providence VA Medical Center, one from St. Raphael Family Clinic. Is that correct? Daniel's face changed again, this time not anger, alarm. He had hoped the papers would stay quiet. You could see it instantly. Yes. Would you like me to review them? Not really. A few people in the gallery almost smiled at that. It was such an honest answer it broke the tension for half a second. Judge Caprio's mouth twitched. That wasn't my question. Daniel stared at the floor. Do what you want. Maria handed the documents up. The first was a clinic intake slip stamped March 28, 2025, 7:58 a.m. St. Raphael Family Clinic. Patient, Evelyn Mercer. Age 68. Copped exacerbation. Medication assistance review. The second was a letter from the Providence VA dated April 10, 2025. It wasn't long. Just enough to confirm Daniel Mercer had been receiving evaluation for chronic insomnia, post-traumatic stress symptoms, and complicated grief related to combat experiences, and the suicide of a fellow Marine in February 2025. The room got even quieter. Not because that erased the crosswalk, it didn't. Because suddenly there was a battlefield standing in traffic court, and everyone could feel it. Judge Caprio set the papers down. Ms. Mercer is your mother. Yes. You were taking her to the clinic. No. Then why were you there? Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, picking up her medication assistance forms. And why were you in the school zone at that hour? He swallowed, taking my daughter to school. There it was, another door opening. Where is your daughter's school? St. Mary's Academy Annex. Near the crosswalk in question. 3 blocks over. And was your daughter in the truck? Daniel's voice almost disappeared. No. That one word landed heavier than all the others. If Lucy wasn't in the truck, where had she be? In. Share this with someone who needs to hear that every courtroom case hides a life behind the paperwork, because at that exact point, everyone in the room could feel there was more coming, and none of it was simple. Judge Caprio saw it too. He asked the kind of question only someone who has listened to thousands of people learns to ask. Mr. Mercer, where was your daughter? Daniel looked like he wanted to walk out rather than answer. His fingers flexed. His shoulders tightened. Marine posture, civilian panic. With my ex-wife. Why? He took too long. Judge Caprio softened his voice. You brought in these documents for a reason. Daniel let out a breath like it hurt his ribs. Because if I didn't, everyone in here was going to think I'm just some jerk who doesn't care about kids. Another mother in the gallery, holding a folder of housing paperwork, looked down at her lap. That was the moment even strangers started seeing him as something more dangerous and more human than a jerk. The judge nodded. And are you? No. Then tell me what happened. Daniel's eyes moved to the monitor where the image of his truck still sat frozen in the crosswalk. When he spoke, his voice had turned careful, almost mechanical, like he was stepping through a minefield. I got a call at 6:11 a.m. from my mother. Couldn't breathe right. Needed her inhaler refill and the clinic paperwork I forgot to pick up the day before. My ex-wife, Nicole, texted at 6:18 saying Lucy wouldn't get in the car because she had a school presentation and wanted me to be the one to take her. I was already late for work. What kind of work do you do? warehouse loading supervisor over at Portside Freight in Cranston. What time were you due? 7. Did you go? No. Why not? Daniel laughed once, bitter and tired, because apparently I'm real good at failing multiple people before breakfast. The line hit the room hard. It sounded rehearsed by pain, not by ego. He continued, I drove to Nicole's place in Johnston. Lucy still wouldn't come out till I promised I'd be there after school too. Then my mother called again. Then the clinic called. Then, he stopped. Judge Caprio waited. Then my phone lit up with a group text from my old unit. One of our guys, Nolan Pierce. His funeral was supposed to be the next week. His sister sent the details. The judge looked down at the VA letter again. This is the fellow Marine. Daniel nodded. Was that morning the first time you'd heard? No, it was the first time I could not hear it. Nobody missed the way his voice cracked on the last word. He kept staring forward, refusing tears by force of will. Helicopter from the hospital cut over the school while I was driving. That sound, he shook his head. I know that sounds stupid. Judge Caprio answered immediately, it does not. Daniel went on. My hands started going numb. I missed the first turn. Lucy wasn't even in the truck and I still kept hearing her voice because she'd been crying 15 minutes earlier. My mother kept calling. The unit chat kept buzzing. I saw the crossing guard late. I hit the brakes. I know what the video looks like. It looks dangerous, the judge said. It was. The admission was small, but it was the first truly clean thing he had given them. Judge Caprio caught it and held it there. Say that again. Daniel's jaw trembled. It was dangerous. And whose fault was that? Mine sat in the room before he said it. Then he said it. Mine. That should have been the breakthrough. It was. Because Judge Caprio had one more document in the file, and he hadn't mentioned it yet. A handwritten statement from Paula Jenkins, the crossing guard. And when he lifted that paper, Daniel went pale. Paula Jenkins was 61, a retired cafeteria worker with silver hair pinned in a neat bun and a shoulder that still bothered her in damp weather. She had been working school crossings for 6 years because her late husband's pension wasn't enough after his stroke. On March 28, when Daniel's truck shot into that crosswalk, Paula had yanked 9-year-old Eli Benton backwards so hard she tore something in her right shoulder. The urgent care report attached to her statement called it a grade 2 strain with rotator cuff inflammation. Sling for 3 weeks, limited lifting for 8. That was the harm Daniel had not yet fully faced. Judge Caprio read from the letter. To the court, my name is Paula Jenkins. I was on crossing duty at Broad and Potters at approximately 7:42 a.m. when the blue pickup failed to stop in time. I had to pull Eli Benton out of the lane. Eli lost his shoe and fell sideways. He was not physically struck, thank God, but he cried uncontrollably and would not cross streets alone for the next several days, according to his mother. My right shoulder was injured when I pulled him. I missed 11 paid shifts between crossing duty and cafeteria substitute work. The courtroom seemed to shrink around Daniel. Judge Caprio went on. Not write this because I want revenge. I write it because people need to understand that near misses are not harmless. Children remember, bodies remember, fear lingers. Then the judge lowered the paper and looked straight at Daniel. Did you know she was injured? Daniel's lips parted, nothing came out. Did you know the child was still afraid to cross? He looked like the answer itself was cutting him. No. It was the truth. Everyone could hear it. The judge tapped the statement once. Now you do. Outrage came back into the room for a moment, but it wasn't cheap anymore. It had weight. Because now Daniel knew the damage had names. Paula, Eli, a shoulder, nightmares, missed wages, one lost shoe and a crosswalk that could have been much worse. This was the point where some defendants dig in deeper. Blame the camera, blame the officer, blame stress, traffic, weather, anyone but themselves. Daniel looked like he might do exactly that. Instead, he whispered, "Is the boy here?" "No," Judge Caprio said. "His mother submitted a note, not testimony." Daniel stared at the floor. "Good." "Why good?" "Because if I had to see him right now, I'd probably walk out of this room." That answer startled people. It was raw enough to be real. Judge Caprio's voice stayed even. "Running is easy, repair is hard." Daniel laughed under his breath, and this time it sounded close to breaking. "You think I don't know that?" The judge delivered another line that would stick. "The strongest thing a Marine can do is tell the truth when pride is begging him to lie." Daniel pressed his tongue into his cheek, held still, said nothing. Judge Caprio asked Maria to read the note from Eli's mother, Teresa Benton. Maria lifted the page. Her voice was soft but clear. "My son Eli is 9 years old and in the 3rd grade. Since the incident, he has asked 3 times if trucks can go through stop signs if adults are sad. I didn't know how to answer that. He says Ms. Jenkins saved him. He says he saw the driver's face and that the driver looked scared too." That sentence passed through the room like a current. He looked scared too. Not angry, not evil, scared. And that's when the story turned again. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever seen one sentence change everything, because the courtroom had gone from wanting to punish a man to trying to understand what kind of fear could sit behind a steering wheel and almost ruin several lives before 8 in the morning. Daniel stood there unmoving, but his eyes had lost their hard edge. You could feel him fighting something bigger than the fines. Judge Caprio asked, "Mr. Mercer, have you ever spoken to a counselor about driving triggers?" Daniel shook his head. "Why not?" "Because I'm not 12. A few people winced. There was the arrogance again, or maybe just shame trying to put its helmet back on. Judge Caprio didn't flinch. "No, because you're scared that if you open the door, everything behind it will come through." Daniel looked up fast. That one landed. The judge continued, "Trauma doesn't care about rank, branch, age, or whether you think you're too old for help." Daniel swallowed. "No one ever said you were weak for serving," the judge said. "Why do so many men think they're weak for healing?" For the first time, Daniel's eyes shined. Not tears falling, just that dangerous glassy look people get right before either anger or collapse. Nobody knew which way he would go. He chose anger first. "With respect, Your Honor, healing doesn't pay rent." The line echoed in the room, brutal because it was true. Judge Caprio nodded. "Tell me about rent." Daniel laughed again, this time like he hated himself for what he was about to admit. "I'm 2 months behind. Ex-wife's been covering half our daughter's school lunch account because I missed it twice. My mother's inhaler cape went up. Overtime got cut. And the same week I'm trying to keep everybody upright, I get told one of my guys from Helmand hung himself in a garage in Fall River." He stopped. Nobody moved. Even the woman with the housing folder stopped flipping pages. Daniel kept talking, faster now, like if he slowed down he would drown. "I've been sleeping maybe 3 hours a night. Some nights none. My truck needs brakes. My supervisor told me one more late clock in and I'm gone. My daughter keeps asking why I don't smile in pictures anymore. My mother lies and says she's fine because she thinks if I know she's scared I'll crack. Nicole hates asking me for anything because she thinks it'll send me over the edge. And then this." He gestured toward the monitor. "This is what I do. This is who I am to everybody in this room, the guy who nearly hit a kid." He had finally said it. Not the video angle, not "I stopped," not pylon. The guy who nearly hit a kid. Judge Caprio let that truth sit untouched for a moment. Then he asked quietly, "Did you apologize to Ms. Jenkins?" Daniel stared at him. "No." Why not? His voice dropped so low the mic. Raphon barely carried it. Because I knew if I heard what happened to that boy, I wouldn't be able to hold it together. That was honest. And honesty, once it enters a courtroom, has a way of pulling more of itself behind it. Judge Caprio looked toward Officer Torres. Did Mr. Mercer mention any of this at the stop? No, Your Honor. Daniel answered before the judge could ask why. Because she had a pen out and I had a problem. That's not the same thing as having a right to dump my whole life in her lap. Officer Torres glanced at him for the first time with something like respect. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but respect. Then Judge Caprio asked the question that cracked open the next layer. Mr. Mercer, why was your daughter not in the truck when you entered that school zone if you just said you were taking her to school? Daniel went rigid. There it was, the part he really didn't want to tell. He rubbed both palms down the front of his jeans and stared at the floor. When he spoke, his voice had gone flat again, but not cold. Numb. Because she saw me shaking. No one breathed. At Nicole's place, Lucy came out with her trifold poster board and saw my hands, asked if I was okay. I lied. She said I didn't look okay. Then I snapped at her to get in the truck. She started crying. Nicole came out, took one look at me and said, absolutely not. She's not getting in that car with you. He shut his eyes. So I left. The room understood now. He had driven into that school zone not with his daughter beside him, but with the fresh shame of being judged unsafe by the one person who knew him best. Judge Caprio spoke carefully, and after that, I went to get the clinic forms, then got stopped, then got to work 40 minutes late, then got suspended for 3 days because I already had one warning. Another consequence, another quiet wound. It was getting harder and harder to find solid ground in the story, because every answer made the picture sharper and sadder at the same time. Maria whispered something to the judge and slid another item up from the file, a sealed white envelope, no return address, hand-delivered that morning according to the log. Judge Caprio looked at it. What's this? Maria checked the note clipped to it. Submitted for the court by a Ms. Nicole Mercer, Your Honor, marked to be read only if relevant. Daniel's entire body stiffened. No, he said immediately. Judge Caprio looked at him. Your ex-wife. Yes. Why no? Because she shouldn't be in this. The judge rested the envelope on the bench. She put herself in this by submitting it. Daniel's voice sharpened. Please don't. Now the whole room knew the envelope mattered. Cliffhangers don't always happen in movies. Sometimes they're just an envelope on a judge's desk and the expression on a man's face when he realizes his last defense might not be control, but exposure. Judge Caprio did not open it, not yet. Instead, he asked Daniel something no one expected. How long have you been out of the Marines? 7 years. And how long have you been pretending you were fine? The room almost winced at the precision of it. Daniel looked like he'd taken a hit. Since before I got out. The answer was instant, too instant to be crafted. Judge Caprio leaned forward. That is a long time to carry a war by yourself. Daniel's mouth twitched like he wanted to make a joke and couldn't. Then the judge said, I'm going to take a 5-minute recess. A murmur ran through the room. Recess. For traffic court. For a school zone citation. That wasn't normal. And it wasn't because the judge needed a break. It was because he had seen enough to know the next 5 minutes would determine whether this case ended as punishment, collapse, or something more difficult and more worthwhile. Bailiff Reggie announced the recess. Benches creaked. People stood. The fluorescent hum suddenly sounded louder. Daniel stayed where he was, one hand on the table, head bowed just enough that you could tell his neck muscles were locked. Officer Torres stepped back toward the witness bench. Judge Caprio disappeared through the side door with the file and the sealed envelope. That should have cooled the room. Instead, it lit it up. Whispers everywhere. That was him, one man said under his breath, glancing at the monitor. Poor kid, someone else whispered. The crossing guard got hurt, said another. A woman near the aisle, later identified as Kendra Mills, an emergency room nurse waiting on a parking matter, looked at Daniel for several seconds before approaching. She wore gray scrubs under a camel coat, hair in a loose bun, badge clipped to her pocket. Not part of the case. Just someone who had seen enough suffering to recognize the look on his face. She stopped at a respectful distance. You need water. Daniel didn't look up. I'm good. You don't look good. He almost smiled at that, but it came out crooked and failed. Story of my life. Kendra set a sealed water bottle on the defense table anyway. Drink it before you pass out. Then she walked away. That tiny act mattered more than anyone realized. Because when people are drowning in shame, the first kindness often feels like the most dangerous thing in the world. Daniel stared at the water for a few seconds, then unscrewed it with shaking fingers. Not the violent shake from panic now. The exhausted kind. The kind that tells on you no matter how hard you're trying to keep your image intact. Officer Torres crossed the room quietly and stopped near him. For what it's worth, she said, I asked if you were okay because I meant it. Daniel didn't answer. I still had to write the ticket. I know. That doesn't make me your enemy. He looked up then, eyes rimmed red, face still controlled. Didn't say you were. She nodded once, good. It was a strange exchange, short, dry, but something in it softened the geometry of the room. The officer was no longer simply the state. The defendant was no longer simply the risk. Two tired adults, both doing a job, both seeing a wound under the mess. Then the side door opened. Judge Caprio returned with the envelope, the VA letter, Paula Jenkins's statement, and another paper no one had seen yet. When court resumed, the judge didn't sit immediately. He stood for a second, looking over the room as if he wanted everyone there to understand this next part was going to matter. He sat, adjusted his glasses, opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter and a child's drawing. Daniel saw the drawing first and shut his eyes. It was in thick marker, a stick-figure man in a green uniform with a square jaw and a little American flag on one shoulder. Beside him, a smaller girl with yellow yarn hair and a pink backpack. Across the top, in wide third-grade handwriting, it said, "And my dad is brave even when he is sad." There are some moments a courtroom feels like a theater. This was not one of them. This was raw, real, too personal for comfort. The kind of thing that makes strangers look down because witnessing it feels almost intimate. Judge Caprio read Nicole Mercer's note. Your Honor, my name is Nicole Mercer. Daniel is my former husband and the father of our daughter Lucy, age 8. I'm not writing to excuse what he did. I refused to let our daughter get in the truck with him that morning because I could see he was not okay. I am writing because the man in that courtroom is not a careless man, but he is a man who thinks asking for help is the same thing as surrender. He has not been sleeping. He startles at sounds. He checks door locks 3 times. He cannot sit with his back to windows. He forgets to eat, but never forgets to send child support even when it means he won't buy groceries for himself. He is drowning and calling it discipline. The room was dead still. The judge continued. He needs accountability, but he also needs intervention. If all he gets today is a fine, we will all be back here for something worse. If he gets help, the man my daughter still believes in may have a chance to come back. Judge Caprio lowered the paper. Daniel was not crying yet. That almost made it harder to watch. Because every muscle in his face was working to keep him from it. The fight against tears had become visible. The slight twitch at the jaw, the nostrils flaring, the refusal to blink. Judge Caprio asked, "Is Nicole generally dramatic, Mr. Mercer?" A few people gave a soft laugh, the kind that comes from pressure finding somewhere safe to escape. Daniel shook his head. Is she generally truthful? He nodded. Then I'm inclined to believe her. Daniel pressed his lips together, looked at the drawing, looked away. Judge Caprio picked up the fourth document. I also have a disciplinary note from Portside Freight. It confirms you were suspended 3 days after arriving late on March 28. It further states your supervisor recommended employee assistance counseling, and you refused, saying, quote, "I'm not broken, I'm behind." Did you say that? Daniel's shoulders dropped an inch. Yeah. The judge repeated it slowly. I'm not broken, I'm behind. Then he looked up with the expression of a man who knew exactly how many people in that room had lived by that sentence. Mr. Mercer, sometimes people hide a wound inside a schedule because a schedule feels easier to fix. No answer. The judge placed all 4 documents in a neat stack. Let's review where we are. You endangered children. You failed to yield. You parked illegally. You spoke disrespectfully to an officer doing her job. A crossing guard was injured pulling a boy from your path. That is serious. Daniel nodded once. At the same time, you are a veteran carrying documented trauma, unresolved grief, severe sleep disruption, family medical stress, financial instability, and what appears to be a near-total inability to ask for help before disaster introduces you to it. That is also serious. The whole room felt suspended between those two truths. Then, Judge Caprio did something that turned the case again. He asked Maria to call Paula Jenkins. Gasps, real ones this time. Because Paula was there. She rose slowly from the second row near the wall, wearing a navy cardigan over a white blouse, her right arm moving carefully even though the sling was gone. Silver hair neatly pinned, practical black shoes, eyes steady. She had been sitting through the whole hearing without drawing attention to herself. Daniel turned, saw her, and went completely still. If a camera had been on his face, that would have been the frame people clipped, not the tears that came later. This, the exact second his arrogance died and accountability became personal. Paula walked to the witness stand without drama, no anger performance, no trembling condemnation. That made her more powerful, not less. Judge Caprio said, "Ms. Jenkins, thank you for being here. I understand you weren't required to appear." "I wanted to." "Why?" She glanced at Daniel, then back to the judge. "Because paper only carries so much." Paula's voice had the texture of someone who had spent decades speaking over cafeteria noise, church socials, and grandchildren. Warm, but firm enough to stop nonsense on contact. Judge Caprio asked, "Would you tell the court what happened from your perspective?" Folded her hands. "I stepped out with my stop paddle up. 2 children were waiting, Eli Benton and his cousin Maya. Eli was talking about a science quiz. Maya was worried she forgot her lunch. Normal kid stuff. Then I saw the truck not slowing the way it should. You learn to read cars in that job. Some drivers are careless. Some are distracted. Some are looking right at you but don't see you. This one," she paused. "This one looked like the driver was physically there and someplace else at the same time." No one in the room missed that phrase. "I pulled Eli back," Paula continued. "He slipped and cried. I twisted my shoulder. It hurt. But what bothered me more was his face. He kept saying, 'I thought the sign meant stop. I thought the sign meant stop.'" Daniel bowed his head. Paula looked at him directly now. "That part stayed with me." Judge Caprio asked, "Do you believe Mr. Mercer intended harm?" "No." "Do you believe he caused harm?" "Yes." The precision of it was surgical. Paula went on, "I don't care for revenge, never have, but I also don't believe we help people by pretending near tragedies are little mistakes." Then she reached into her purse and removed something small and silver. A Marine Corps challenge coin. The room stirred again. "I found this near the curb after the stop," she said. Must have fallen when he slammed on the brakes or leaned out the window. I brought it because I wanted him to have it back." Daniel lifted his head slowly. His eyes were wide now, stunned. Paula held the coin in her palm. "I looked up the emblem later. My son served in Iraq. Army, not Marines, but enough for me to know what this means to men who carry them." Judge Caprio asked, "Why return it now?" Paula's answer was simple and devastating. "Because if I hand it to him before he tells the truth, it becomes comfort. If I hand it to him after, maybe it becomes responsibility." A whisper moved through the courtroom. That was the line. That was the moment everyone in the room knew they were watching something that would stay with them. Like this video, if you believe the most powerful people in a courtroom aren't always the ones in robes, because Paula Jenkins had just said more in one sentence than most attorneys say in 10 pages. Daniel looked at the challenge coin like it was evidence from another life. Judge Caprio asked, "Ms. Jenkins, what outcome are you asking for?" She didn't hesitate. "I want him held accountable. I want the fines to matter. I want him in treatment. And I want him to apologize like the children involved are real human beings and not just names in a report." Judge Caprio nodded, "Fair." Then he asked, "Anything else?" Paula took a breath. "Yes, I brought something from Eli." Maria stepped forward and took a folded sheet of notebook paper from her. Child handwriting, blue lines, green crayon in the margin. Judge Caprio read aloud. "Dear Truckman, Ms. Jenkins says maybe you were having a bad morning. I have bad mornings too when I can't find my other shoe. I was scared, but I am okay. My mom says people have to say sorry with their mouth and with what they do next. I hope you drive slow now." That was it. No accusation, no venom, just the clean moral clarity of a 9-year-old boy. People in the gallery wiped their eyes openly now. Kendra the nurse, the mother with the housing folder, even bailiff Reggie looked down for a second. Daniel's breathing changed. You could hear it at the microphone. Shorter, rougher. He put one hand over his mouth and looked away hard, like maybe, if he faced the wall instead of the witnesses, he could still control the implosion. It didn't work. Judge Caprio saw it coming, so did of. Pfizer Tours, so did Paula. The judge's voice softened to nearly a family tone. "Mr. Mercer." No answer. "Look at me." Daniel lifted his eyes. And that's when Judge Caprio asked the question that stopped everything. "When was the last time you let yourself grieve?" You could see the impact physically. Daniel's shoulders shook once, almost imperceptibly, like an internal hit finally reached the surface. He tried to answer. Nothing came out. He tried again. Not. Then it happened. The sound that left him was not elegant, not cinematic, not controlled. It was the strangled, shocked sound of a man discovering that if you hold too much pain under pressure for too long, it doesn't come out as tears first. It comes out as collapse. He bent forward with both hands on the table and started sobbing. Not a dignified cry, not a single tear sliding down the cheek. Full body, shaking, breath-breaking sobs he clearly hated even while they were happening. The kind that make your knees weak. The kind that silence every whisper in a room because suddenly everyone understands they are not watching a performance. They are watching a human being come apart. Judge Caprio raised a hand immediately. Stopped the recording for a moment. Maria froze. Even the court reporter looked up. "Take your time, Mr. Mercer," the judge said. No one moved. Daniel tried to apologize and couldn't get the words together. I'm sorry, I just." He put his hand over his eyes. "I can't." His chest heaved. His boots scraped the floor. Officer Torres stepped half a pace forward, then stopped, letting him keep his dignity. Paula looked down, giving him the privacy of not staring. Kendra quietly slid the tissue box from the clerk's side to the defense table without a word. It was such a small movement, but it undid several people in the gallery. Judge Caprio waited. That was the remarkable part. No rushing, no embarrassment, no institutional impatience. Just waiting. Finally, Daniel grabbed the tissues, pressed them to his face, and shook his head over and over like he wanted to refuse his own breakdown. "I should have stopped," he said into the tissues. "I should have stopped, I know." Nobody argued. "I keep telling everybody I'm fine because if I'm not fine then everything falls apart. And she looked at me and told me my daughter wasn't getting in that truck. And I knew she was right. And I still drove. I still drove." The admission hit with a force that felt almost physical. Judge Caprio said quietly, "Keep going." Daniel lowered the tissues. His face was blotched red now, eyes swollen. The Marine posture was gone. In its place was a man stripped of every defense except truth. "I didn't apologize because I didn't deserve to be forgiven. I didn't ask for help because once you admit you can't handle it, people start making decisions for you. They take your kid for the day. They suspend you from work. They look at you like you're a hazard. Maybe you are." He swallowed hard. "That boy's letter, I didn't know he wrote a letter. I didn't know he lost a shoe. I didn't know Miss Jenkins got hurt because of me." Paula's eyes filled then too, though she stayed composed. Daniel turned toward her. "I am so sorry." Not enough yet. Everyone knew it, but it was real. He turned toward the bench again. "I thought if I kept moving fast enough, nothing could catch me, but it caught me anyway." Judge Caprio said, "Pain always does." Then Daniel said the line that became the heart of the whole story. "I survived war just to become dangerous at a crosswalk. What kind of man does that make me?" The room held its breath. Judge Caprio answered with calm force, giving him neither pity nor condemnation. "It makes you a man at a crossroads. What you do next decides the rest." That was one of the 5 quotes people would later repeat most. And it was the start of the ultimate confrontation. Because now the issue was no longer whether Daniel committed the violations. He had. The issue was what justice looked like when guilt, danger, trauma, and possibility all stood in the same pair of shaking boots. Judge Caprio asked for 5 more minutes, not as a recess, but to confer quietly with the clerk about sentencing options and referrals. The courtroom stayed seated. Nobody wanted to leave, not even the people whose own cases were delayed. Everyone in the room understood they were watching the kind of moment you tell your spouse about at dinner. The kind of story that spreads through barbershops, church basements, police roll calls, VFW halls, and school pickup lines, because it says something true about what people can become when truth finally catches them. When the judge finished conferring, he looked first to Daniel, then to Paula, then to Officer Torres. "Before I impose sentence," he said, "I want clarity from everyone involved." He turned to Officer Torres. "Officer, in your opinion, does Mr. Mercer pose an immediate public safety concern if left entirely untreated?" "Yes, Your Honor." Daniel closed his eyes. The judge turned to Paula. "Do you believe accountability can be constructive here?" "Yes." "What would constructive mean to you?" Paula answered without hesitation. "He faces what he did. He gets treatment. He gives something back where children can see it, and he never again mistakes private suffering for a license to endanger the public." Judge Caprio nodded slowly. "Well said." Then he looked at Daniel. "Do you want mercy?" Daniel's answer surprised everyone. "No." The judge raised a brow. "Why not?" "Because mercy feels like a shortcut right now." That made the room go still again. He continued, voice raw but steadying. "I want a chance, not a shortcut." Judge Caprio let the distinction breathe. "That," the judge said, "is the first mature thing you've said all morning." Even Daniel almost laughed through the wreckage of his face. The judge continued, "Mr. Mercer, mercy without truth is weakness. Truth without mercy is cruelty. My job is neither weakness nor cruelty. My job is justice. There was another quote, another one people would write down. Then came the twist no one expected. Judge Caprio turned to Paula and asked, "Ms. Jenkins, if the court were to structure community service, would you be willing to have Mr. Mercer serve part of it with the Safe Crossings program under supervision?" The gallery murmured loudly now. Daniel looked up in shock. Paula blinked, surprised but thoughtful. "You mean at the school?" "Not alone," Judge Caprio said. "Not immediately, but under approved supervision as part of a restorative sentence, so he understands in real time what he nearly took for granted." Paula considered it, long enough that the silence became electric. Then she said, "If he shows up honestly, yes." Daniel stared at her like he didn't understand what he was hearing. Judge Caprio asked, "Mr. Mercer, would you accept that?" Daniel shook his head once, not in refusal but in disbelief. "Why would she trust me near that school?" Paula answered before the judge could. "I didn't say I trusted you. I said I was willing to let you earn something." That hit harder than forgiveness would have. Because forgiveness can sometimes feel soft, earning has weight. And still the story wasn't done. Judge Caprio reached for another small note that Maria had quietly placed on his bench during the breakdown. It had come in from the courtroom officer after a phone call from the hallway. Judge Caprio scanned it and looked up. "Mr. Mercer, are you aware your mother is downstairs?" Daniel's head jerked up. "What?" "She apparently arrived during the recess. She's in a wheelchair and was advised not to come up because of shortness of breath." Daniel looked like the floor had disappeared under him. "No, she wasn't supposed to." Judge Caprio held up a hand. "She isn't testifying, but she asked the officer to deliver a message." Maria handed over a yellow note card. The judge read it quietly, then aloud. "Danny, stop trying to be made of steel. Steel rusts. Let people hold you up. Love, Ma." A full-body shiver ran through Daniel. He folded over again, but this time he stayed upright, gripping the edge of the table with both hands as if that note alone had taken the last of his strength. This was the unexpected twist around the deepest point of the story. Not new evidence of guilt, not some dramatic secret crime. Something worse and better, love cutting straight through pride. If cameras had been rolling from every angle, that note card would have gone everywhere. Hit that subscribe button if you believe sometimes the toughest lesson in life is learning you are not supposed to carry everything alone. Because at this point, nobody in that courtroom was thinking about a routine traffic docket anymore. They were watching a family, a community, and a legal system all trying in real time to decide whether a man could be held fully responsible and still be helped back to himself. Judge Caprio finally announced the disposition. On the charge of speeding in a school zone, the court finds the violation proven. On the charge of failure to yield to a crossing guard, proven. On the charge of illegal standing in a clinic loading zone, proven. Daniel nodded, tears still drying on his face. No argument, no flinch, just acceptance. The judge continued. The standard fines on these combined matters would be substantial, and frankly, the facts could support harsher administrative consequences if this were handled in a more rigid setting. Daniel whispered, "I understand." "I'm not done." "Yes, sir." Judge Caprio's eyes sharpened. "You will pay restitution for Ms. Jenkins's lost wages in the amount documented. You will also complete a certified trauma and driving safety program approved by the court, with proof of attendance from the Providence VA or affiliated services. You will perform 60 hours of community service, 20 of which shall be under the Safe Crossings Youth Safety Initiative if Ms. Jenkins remains willing and the program approves. You will write letters of apology, one to Ms. Jenkins, one to Officer Torres, and one to Eli Benton and his mother, not for theatrical reasons, because words need practice when pride has neglected them. Daniel's voice shook. Yes, sir. The judge leaned forward. Additionally, I am suspending a portion of your fines conditioned on full compliance for 6 months. Daniel looked up stunned. Do not mistake that for me feeling sorry for you, Judge Caprio said. I am investing in the version of you your daughter drew. You could hear people inhale across the room. That was the quote. That was the one. The judge wasn't finished. If you fail treatment, skip service, or reappear on a similar matter, the suspension evaporates, the full fines return, and I will assume today meant nothing. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. Good. Now listen carefully. Your service to this country matters. It does not place you above the law, but neither does your worst morning place you beyond redemption. Those are two different lies, and I don't want you living in either one. Daniel's face crumpled again, but he held himself together this time. Then Judge Caprio did something simple that made the room even quieter. He looked at Paula and said, Ms. Jenkins, thank you for carrying both truth and grace. He looked at Officer Torres. Officer, thank you for doing your job with both firmness and eyes open. He looked at Daniel. And Mr. Mercer, thank you for finally telling the truth before life forced it out of you in a worse place. The sentence could have ended there. But Daniel did something no one expected. He turned toward Paula. May I say something? Judge Caprio nodded. Daniel faced her fully now, shoulders squared not with military pride, but with the vulnerability of a man choosing not to hide. Ms. Jenkins, I don't deserve the chance you just helped give me. You were right. Near misses are not harmless. I scared that boy. I hurt you. And I turned my own pain into a public risk. I can't take back that morning, but I can make sure the next version of me isn't the one who stood in this courtroom trying to minimize it. If you let me do those hours with your program, I'll show up early. I'll listen. And I'll remember that that crosswalk belongs to kids, not to whatever storm I'm carrying. Paula nodded slowly. Good, she said, because children should never have to dodge an adult's unhealed pain. There was another line people would repeat for weeks. Daniel turned toward Officer Torres. Officer, I'm sorry too. You asked if I was okay, and I treated you like you were attacking me. Officer Torres gave the smallest nod. Apology accepted. Don't waste it. Then he looked at the bench. Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Caprio replied with calm finality. Don't thank me yet. Show me. And the gavel came down once. Not hard, not theatrical, just enough to mark the end of one phase and the beginning of another. If the story ended there, it would still have been unforgettable. But the reason people never forgot it was what happened after. Because real redemption is not made in a speech. It is made in weeks, in repetitions, in the unglamorous discipline of becoming safer than you were. 3 weeks later at 7:10 on a damp Tuesday morning, Daniel Mercer stood at that same Broad and Potter's intersection wearing a neon yellow volunteer vest over a plain navy hoodie, a thermos of black coffee in one hand and a foldable caution sign in the other. He was early like he had promised. The sky was a dull silver. The pavement still held last night's rain in the cracks. School buses wheezed at corners. Dunkin's steam drifted every time the door opened. And Paula Jenkins, standing beside him with her stop paddle tucked under one arm, watched him the way a teacher watches a student who said all the right things and now has to prove they meant them. You're 10 minutes early, she said. I used to be 20 when I was a staff sergeant. She raised an eyebrow. And how'd that work out for you? Daniel almost smiled. Not great. That was the new thing about him. The armor hadn't vanished, but it wasn't welded shut anymore. The first week of community service was brutal in ways no one had anticipated. Not physically, emotionally. Every time a child stepped off the curb, Daniel felt the memory of the footage in his chest like a bruise. Every time a driver rolled too close to the line, his entire body tensed. He learned how much trust lives in simple routines. A raised paddle, a nod, a child's backpack bouncing across paint. He learned that safety is made of dozens of invisible decisions by adults who are supposed to have already mastered themselves. Paula did not coddle him, she corrected him. Stand farther from the lane. Watch the left turners. Don't scan like you're in a combat zone. Scan like you're protecting a child. That last one stopped him cold the first time she said it. He asked what she meant. Paula answered, in war you look for threats. Here you create calm. That line worked on him all day. He was also going to treatment now. Twice a week at the VA. One group session, one individual. The first day he arrived in the waiting room, he nearly walked back out when he heard someone laugh too loudly down the hall. But he stayed. Sat in a plastic chair beneath a bulletin board covered in veterans' resource flyers. Read the same pamphlet on sleep hygiene 4 times without processing a word. When his therapist, Dr. Samir Patel, called his name, Daniel stood like he was approaching an ambush. Dr. Patel was in his mid-40s, soft-spoken, dark-framed glasses, the kind of clinician who made room without making a show of it. His office had a window facing a parking lot, a bookshelf with military family counseling manuals, and a small brass anchor paperweight from the Navy his wife had served in. No miracle speeches, no magical unlocking, just disciplined honesty. "What brings you here?" Dr. Patel asked. Daniel gave the answer men like him always give first. "Court order." Dr. Patel nodded. "That got you through the door, it's not why you stay." Over the next weeks, Daniel learned how much of his life had been arranged around avoidance. Routes chosen to skip hospital helicopters. Grocery aisles avoided because of forklift beeps that sounded too much like backup alarms on base. Sleep postponed because dreams were waiting on the other side. He told Dr. Patel about Nalin Pierce, the Marine from Fall River who had survived IEDs and firefights and then lost a private war in a garage. He told him about the guilt that attached itself to other men's deaths like a parasite, about why asking for help felt like handing his rifle to someone else, about why Nicole saying Lucy wouldn't ride with him had hurt so badly, because it was true. Meanwhile, the apology letters came slowly. He wrote the first 5 drafts to Eli Benton and tore up all of them. Too formal. Too self-focused. Too much excuse. On the 6th try, he wrote, "Dear Eli, the sign did mean stop. I failed you, not the sign." That line stayed. He wrote to Teresa Benton, too, thanking her for raising a son whose letter had told the truth more cleanly than any adult in the courtroom. He wrote to Officer Torres, admitting that when she asked if he was okay, he heard accusation because he could not tolerate concern. He wrote to Paula last, because hers mattered most and scared him most. "Dear Ms. Jenkins, you returned my challenge coin at the exact moment I had to decide whether being a Marine meant protecting my pride or protecting the public. You made the answer clear." Paula read the letter at her kitchen table and cried into her tea. What Daniel did not know yet was that she had written one back. That was the next twist. On May 27, 2025, nearly 6 weeks after the hearing, Daniel was finishing his supervised shift when Paula handed him a sealed envelope beside the crosswalk. Kids had already gone inside. Morning traffic had thinned. The rain had cleared into pale sunlight. "What's this?" he asked. "Read it later." He looked nervous instantly. "Am I getting fired from volunteer school crossing?" She snorted, "Don't tempt me." At home that afternoon, in the small 2-bedroom apartment on Oaklawn Avenue where rent notices still sat too close to the toaster, Daniel opened the envelope at his kitchen table. Lucy's drawing from court was magneted to the fridge now, a deliberate reminder. Nicole had given him a copy after the hearing. He kept it there where he could not avoid it. Paula's letter was writ in neat cursive on lined paper. "Daniel, you asked in court what kind of man survives war and becomes dangerous at a crosswalk. The wrong question was in that sentence. The word is not becomes. The word is stays. None of us stay safe, kind, patient, or whole without tending to those things. I do not excuse what happened, but I have watched you these weeks. You look children in the eye. You learn their names. You arrive early. You step back from the lane when your shoulders tighten. That tells me the man in court was not your final form. Keep going, Miss Jenkins. Daniel sat motionless for a long time after reading it. Then he cried again. Not like the courtroom, not explosive, quieter, the kind of crying that comes when someone hands you hope in a form you can trust because it cost them something to offer it. He called Nicole that evening. "Can I take Lucy for ice cream after school Friday?" he asked. Long pause. "Are you okay to drive?" It was the first time since the hearing she'd asked without edge, just fact, just care. Daniel answered honestly, "Yeah, and if I'm not, I won't." That answer changed everything between them. Because trust rarely returns in one giant gesture. It returns in reliable sentences. By June, the safe crossings hours had become something more than punishment. Kids knew him now. Not all of them knew the backstory, and that was fine. To them, he was Mr. Dan, the tall guy with the marine tattoo peeking under his sleeve who reminded drivers to stop, picked up dropped mittens, and once knelt in the rain to help a first grader tape her broken poster tube shut with black electrical tape from his truck. Eli Benton saw him first from a distance. Small boy, brown hair, new blue sneakers, same red backpack, different years' scuff marks. Daniel tensed instantly. Paula noticed. "He doesn't owe you comfort," she said quietly. "I know." Eli approached with his mother at the curb. Teresa Benton was in her early 30s, hair pulled into a loose ponytail, coffee in one hand, ID badge from Rhode Island Hospital clipped to her purse. Her expression was cautious, not hostile, protective, appropriate. Daniel stood a step back, giving them room. Teresa spoke first. "Eli wanted to say hi." Eli looked up. "You're driving slow now." Daniel nodded. "Yes, I am." "Good." That was it for a second. Then Eli reached into his backpack and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Another drawing. This time a crosswalk with bright yellow lines, a stop paddle, and a blue truck stopped far behind it. Stick figure kids smiling in the middle. In the corner, a tall man in a vest. "My teacher says when something bad happens and then it gets fixed, you can draw the new ending," Eli said. Daniel took the paper carefully like it was fragile glass. "Thank you." Teresa watched his face soften. "He still remembers that day," she said, "but he talks about Miss Jenkins and now about you, in a different way." Daniel nodded once, unable to say much. Teresa added, "I'm not saying trust comes easy. I'm saying children notice effort." That line stayed with him too. Like this video, if you believe real redemption looks like repetition, because the truth is, nothing about Daniel's recovery was flashy. There were no movie montages. There were panic spikes. One therapy session he walked out of after discussing convoy footage. One night he sat in his parked truck outside Nicole's apartment for 20 minutes because Lucy's laughter coming through the open window made him suddenly remember the children at the crosswalk, and he wasn't sure he deserved to hear his daughter sounding that happy. But instead of driving away, he called Dr. Patel's after-hours line, left a message, and waited. That was progress. Tiny, unheroic, real. Portside Freight brought him back after the suspension, but on probation. His supervisor, Carl D'Amico, a barrel-chested man in his 50s with permanent forklift dust on his boots, called him into the office the first morning back. "I heard about court," Carl said. Daniel braced for judgment. Carl leaned back in his chair. "My brother came back from Iraq meaner than hell and quieter than death. Didn't get help till his second divorce. I'm not interested in your pride, Mercer. I'm interested in whether you're gonna be safe on my floor." "I am." "You in?"